Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Blue Grit Radio podcast. And today joining me is a gentleman I've been acquainted with. I was able to get on his show, The Hero Academy. We're going to talk about that later. But Dave Leath, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you, brother. Did anybody ever tell you have a radio voice? Like, your voice is so deep. It sounds like it's made for radio.
No.
Anyone ever tell you have a face for radio?
No, luckily that hasn't been a thing. Usually there's enough self-proclaimed knuckle draggers around me that actually claim that for themselves, so it kind of deflects some of that energy away from me.
I've been told jokingly that I had a face for radio.
Oh, no. And like we were talking about before the podcast, or even when I was on your show, we were both kind of like, how old are you? And you don't look that old. Like both of us at each other. Just a testament to, what you can control, and that's taking care of ourselves and health.
Yeah,
and
I got my
wellness.
water. I got my path. We got this.
Oh, look at you.
Where were we? Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
We got this, and I saved this bottle because it was such a
metal.
good,
metal water bottle. See, look at this.
Not leaching into my water.
No microplastics. I got my glass thing here. It's legit. Me and my recruiter, we got one of our background guys off of the plastic.
Yes.
So it's all about the little wins. He was just crushing those, Kirkland signature water bottles a couple a day. And we're like, hey, great, you're hydrating. But, there's a filtered filling station just down the hall, BYO water bottle.
I think as more people start to realize that those plastics are really, really like leaching into everything that we eat, I think more and more people will stop. I still microwave ready meals. I still microwave
in
plastics.
The plastic?
Yeah, in the plastic. I'm guilty of it. But I think the contents of the meal is more important than the little bit of plastic that I'm nuking.
Yeah, you got to get some glassware, but it's heavy and it's kind of clunky, right?
Yes.
You literally pick your poison. You can't have it all. And like, it's me and my buddy, we used to joke that literally you go more in this health vein than you like lean into these other things that someone's saying, oh my gosh, don't do that, right?
Yep.
We talked about how you're plant-based, and then there's like Stephen Gundry's The Plant Paradox, where it's like, oh, most of these plants are trying to hurt and kill you, all these anti-nutrients. And I can see why so many people are just I'm just gonna eat my Cheetos. I can't even do this.
Yeah, you know what? I tell everyone that I will occasionally have pizza. It's not like I'm super strict. I won't say vegan. It's too much of a hot button, too much of a hot topic.
Yeah.
And I won't say keto. I won't say any. I'll just say plant-based. I try to eat more vegetables than anything else. Vegetables and fruit. And like, you can't go wrong with vegetables and fruit. And then the number one question is, how do you get your protein, bro? How do you get your protein? Well, I have tempeh, I have tofu, and I have protein shakes. I have pea protein. And as you approach over 40, 45, you actually don't need as much protein, even in athletic endeavors, because your body doesn't process it the same as when you're in your 20s and 30s. So you don't want to tax your kidneys. So
it's so hard, and it's so person dependent, right? Because there are more resources saying that as you get older, you do need more protein. But who are we speaking to, right? Maybe it's the people that have very little functional muscle mass through their adulthood, and so they're like, hey, you're getting older, your bone density is getting worse, like it's time to load up now, right? Versus maybe you're active individuals that eat a lot of everything, maybe they can dial it back.
I think it really depends on the source of the protein too, because if you're getting protein from your meal versus drinking it down, ingesting it like super fast form in the form of a shake, then you might be taxing your kidneys a little bit more. If at a point when I was trying to lose weight, I was up over like 20 pounds from where I should be. And when I was trying to lose weight, I was drinking like 2 to 3 shakes a day, and then I was donating blood, and they're like, your iron is really high.
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't know why. I'm like, I'm not eating meat. I'm not eating anything. And then I realized it was the protein shake. If you look at the pea protein, it says one shake is 40% of your daily intake.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is like I got really into plant-based proteins a few years back, and I was, doing all the research and like, oh, pea is only these aminos, and then you usually balance it with brown rice protein, and then maybe add some hemp. So I was actually going on this website where you can customize like your percentages.
Yeah.
It didn't taste great, but all to say like then I start hearing like, hey, brown rice is literally irritating to the gut, and so a lot of times, it became a health food, but then, almost every culture around the world for centuries has removed the hull off of it to eat white rice. And it's really only people in poverty that would eat brown rice because they don't have the time or the resource to process it. And so it's cheaper. So you're like, what is going on, right? And then you make the protein of like literally that outside part that's supposed to be tough for your body. And so again, we're not doctors, folks.
Yes.
You gotta mess around, be patient with the process, see what works well for you. But yeah, I mean, I was talking about protein, and then earlier microplastics made me remember hearing about how much plastic is in the ocean. And so the seafood we eat, right, if you want to eat quote unquote healthier sources of meat or protein, and then you have that issue, right? If you go way into seafood, then you could get a lot of stuff in them from all the garbage we throw into the
I
ocean,
don't
which is super
know.
sad.
I don't know who came up with the idea to dump landfills and mountains of garbage into the ocean. I don't know who came up with that idea, but that was a terrible idea. A terrible idea. Hey, let's pour this sludge into the water that we eat and drink from.
Well, we don't see it. And it's affecting the little guy over there more than it's affecting us, potentially.
No, I think it's affecting
It's
everyone
probably
around the
affecting
world.
all of us, yeah. No,
Like
no.
it's so crazy. I think you just have to really watch everything that you put in your mouth, and as long as it's not super processed, I think you'll be okay. You know?
Yeah. That's the key, right? Processed. How processed is it? And it's one thing if you're talking about like a protein, right? Without all this all these artificial sweeteners and and read your labels, right? I think that's a good note for regardless of what your dietary preferences are, right? But
Yes,
there's going to be a vegan and there's going to be a whey protein that have just all kinds of garbage to include
yes.
all this added sugar and like cheap carbs and all this stuff. So like take a look. You get what you pay for. I like to be
Those
frugal, but that's the thing.
vegan cheeses are actually super processed.
Mhm.
So you're going like really far out of your way to not eat cow's milk cheese. And I try to really stay away from cheese on a daily basis. But sometimes, like I said, I will have. Sometimes pizza just gets me. Like
Mm.
it calls me, and I really try to stay away from those vegan cheeses because they're super high in saturated fats. Some of them are made with coconut oil,
Mhm.
and some of them made with soybean oil. And if you read the labels on them, you'll realize like, wow, this has a lot more ingredients than
And
having
cheese.
regular
Yeah,
dairy
then like real
cheese.
cheese, yeah.
So the thing that you're trying to avoid, you're actually hurting yourself in another way by getting too much saturated fats. And that's why I love that app. I think you and I talked about it, MyFitnessPal.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
makes it so easy to track your macros and your what's the opposite of macros?
Micros.
Micros?
Yeah,
Yeah,
your
I don't even.
micronutrients, macronutrients. Yeah, so like your for some of the listeners, like your macros are like your protein, carbs, fats, and then your micros more like the minerals and vitamins
So I
that
don't even
going
look at
into it.
the micros. I don't even.
Yeah.
So that's why I couldn't even think of the word because I don't think about those at all. I do take an essential amino acid powder that I mix to
Mhm.
my, just because it tastes good.
Yeah.
And my trainer said you should add this to every meal to just because he knew that I was plant-based or
Yeah,
vegan,
that makes
let's
tons of
say.
sense.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I was adding the EAAs to every meal. So I found one that I really like, a blood orange flavor, and it's
Mm,
actually really good. So I don't pay attention to the micronutrients at all. I just try to eat spinach, broccoli, and asparagus. And I think
yeah.
if you eat those and you eat some blueberries and some watermelon, I think everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about, well, your sources of protein being like tempeh, right? And you're not talking about Beyond Meat, right? Because when you talk about
No,
processed stuff, like,
no,
man, that's got to be,
ultra processed.
yeah. Have you seen some of these memes where they compare the ingredients of that to like dog food, and it's almost the
Yes,
same? It's like because
yes,
it's really cruddy, cheap vegetable oil, which is not better for you than animal fat. It's probably worse, other than like your vegetable oils like olive oil, avocado oil, right? So
yes.
there's that, and then it's like cornmeal and pea protein, like a little bit, but then it's all just like bran and all these fillers, all these like cheap kind of feed stuff.
Yeah, those fake meats, the fake chicken, the impossible meat, the impossible burger, when you see those impossible nuggets, those are good when you're transitioning from eating meat and you just feel like I need a burger or I need chicken. That's when you use those. You use those for a few months, 6 to 9 months, and then you slowly you wean yourself away from those things,
Mm.
and then you realize that you don't really need them. Tempeh tastes like chicken. You get the buffalo tempeh from Target by Light Life. It's delicious. It has the texture of chicken. Um,
You just
and
described, before I forget, you just
yeah,
described like impossible meats as basically being like Nicorette, or like,
yes.
like people have like a caffeine pouches when they're trying to get off the chew.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
that's really in
it's a
my
tool.
mind, that's the intention of it. It's a
Sure.
tool for people who are transitioning that they feel like they need meat. Every now and then, once or twice a year, I'll go to Burger King and I will get the Impossible Burger. Um, I I stopped eating meat for my blood for health reasons because
Hmm.
of my cholesterol and just all of my numbers. I wanted to get better, and they did get better as soon as I stopped eating meat. I had a 0% chance of getting diabetes, even though I love sugar. I love chocolate and candies. I
Mm.
don't overdo it, but I do have chocolate every single day. But my all of my blood work got better once I got off the meat because they were like, your cholesterol's been so high, and I always ate clean, but they're like, your cholesterol's so high, you're gonna have to go on a medication if you don't change. So I stopped eating meat initially just for health purposes, and then I started paying attention more to like the humane side of it, and I was like, well, I've been living for the last 4 or 5 years without eating chickens and cow. I don't need to contribute to killing them. I
Sure.
saw something on Instagram that was these two females cooking a giraffe head.
Whoa.
And yeah, yeah, it was pretty wild. I'm gonna send it to you. And a lot of people in the comments wrote, "There's just some animals you don't eat." And I was like, well, what's the difference between eating a giraffe and eating a cow? Like, you just got
Yeah, it's
used to
not
you,
that different. Yeah.
and then some West Indians eat goat, right?
Hmm.
Oxtail, goat. So what's the difference between eating a giraffe's head and eating a cow's head? Like maybe there's some parts of an animal you don't eat, but
Yeah, I think there's so much cultural context, right? And those that know
yes,
me know that I love meat, and I have gone down the Netflix rabbit hole when I was visiting my now wife when she was living out of state, working out of state. But yeah, I was like, man.
what country was she living in
Oh, so she
or
was just in
working out of?
California, yeah,
Oh,
but it was
okay.
just out of state. But
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, so I was just kind of waiting for her to be done with work, and
I thought
just
you meant overseas.
no, no, no. So, but I was going down the hole of like, forks over knives, and
Yeah. Yep.
this is before they had the game changers thing. But yeah, so I started looking into it, and I started going like less and less meat, and then I found a bunch of stuff that was I guess just to say that it turned me back the other way, and I do think that there's a Venn diagram, right, where the crossover, it depends on your blood work, right? So I like that you're talking about blood work because I think
Yeah.
it's super probably irresponsible and unsafe to just go like hard in one direction without any real
Yes.
context to your
Yes.
lifestyle, your genetics, all these things. Because like I have a buddy that's pretty health minded, but he likes to enjoy himself, right? He likes to have some drink, have some food. He works out regularly, but he's mindful of his blood work. But he's seeing like some of the things that are commonly recommended to hopefully help his blood work. Like he has to almost go the other way. Like he's really having to experiment and go back to his doc and kind of check things out.
Did
Um,
you try the carnivore diet? Did you
I did
try
it
it?
for like not full on. I did it for like 3 weeks, and I'd say I was 95% there.
Did you have like
The
did you have the
gastro
run
issues.
did you have the runs and like diarrhea, like, or was it just,
It was a little bit.
or constipate, like either
Yeah.
way, or was it pretty much normal?
Yeah, no, I didn't have anything too crazy, but like I said, I didn't go like 100%, and I have heard a lot about that, right? I did a lot of research on that because I was really intrigued. I had done keto before that, and again, like context matters, right? You hear all these. There are some people that are like hard in the keto. Maybe they've been doing it 5, 10, 15 years, and they're in great shape, and life's awesome, and their markers are better than ever. But it wasn't for me, right? Like my genetic, like there's no Asian person in the last few hundred years that's been subsisting on like only like meat and fat, right? Like
Right.
Asian countries are all pretty like, except for other parts of like China that get close to Russia, like it's pretty
S-
warm or temperate.
seafood and rice and
Yeah, and
vegetables.
like
Seafood, rice,
lots
and
of
vegetables.
vegetables, yeah,
Yeah.
fruit, starches, like that's like natural starches are just a thing for like, Chinese folks, which is who I'm descended from. So it doesn't make sense, right? Whereas like my Scandinavian buddy, like heritage from like Northern Europe, like he might do really well on a super high fat, super high red meat diet. And I think that it's important to pay note to those things. But then also I like working out hard. I really liked lifting super heavy at the time, which with a high stress career and a poor sleep schedule, like all these things compounded to so much cortisol and killed my
Yes.
thyroid. Like the hormonal impacts were big, not because of keto, but I'll say keto probably didn't help. I think it's fair to assume that.
I want to share nutritionfacts.org because I know that you like to do research. Nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Greger, he actually shows the studies and then he talks about like what the studies are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And we found him after watching the Game Changers. I went down that whole rabbit hole, Forks Over Knives,
Mm-hmm.
the Game Changers also. Before that, though, I had gone to Japan because I always wanted to go to Japan. Have
Mm.
you been to any Asian countries?
Yeah, love Japan. We went briefly, and I've been to Taiwan a couple times, where some of my family's from, and Vietnam, Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things I was going to say. One, Japan, they don't give you a lot of meat in your soups, right? So, like, I wasn't plant-based. I wasn't vegan at the time when I went. That was 2016, I think. So I was eating meat then, but I love the food in Japan. I was eating sushi. I was eating,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting all kinds of bowls
Everything's
of
good in Japan.
ramen and noodles. Right? I would go to these shops, and you get a nice massive bowl of soup for like $7, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of meat in it, but there was a good amount of vegetables, and the servings also. Like if you got a plate of something, the servings were smaller than America. Did you notice that in any of the
That's like
countries that?
that's like everywhere in the world. Like, and think about like Cheesecake Factory, right? Like that's like
Yeah.
the
Oh my
epitome
God,
of America, right? Like
that is the epitome.
it should be two dishes, like right? That for like two
Yeah.
grown men
Yes.
to share like one thing for like $16. That's what it should be. But man, yeah.
Even TGI Fridays, Applebee's, all of those places, the serving sizes here are so ridiculously out proportion to what you should be eating. And that was a lesson that I picked up from going to Japan. It was like, okay, when I have my meals, have smaller size meals.
Mm,
And then if I need to eat 6 meals throughout the day, which I never did, I think the most I got up to was 5 meals in a day, and I'd be stuffed. But if you make smaller portions and then you eat more frequently, you feel like you're always eating, but you're eating less.
mm.
That's one calorie trick that I learned, and I learned that from Japan. Having smaller plates and more frequent meals.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and
you
if
you
you
could
actually like use smaller plates, my wife makes
yes.
fun of me because I use these little bowls and it look like cereal bowls, but I'll usually get seconds, right? Because
Yeah.
I can eat, I can put down food, and I like to eat. But
But if you had a
normally,
massive, but if you had a big bowl
oh
and
yeah,
then you also got
yeah,
seconds,
I'd probably do that, right? Like I'd
you probably
probably
do that.
yeah, the mental thing of like eat, pause. I mean, that's huge, right? Eat slower for digestion and just the feeling of satiety for feeling satiated. But yeah,
I
also
love
what
that
you
word.
said,
I love that word.
satiated.
No,
It's a
satiety.
satiety. Yeah, yeah.
That's a great word.
But yeah, with Japan, have you heard of this concept? I don't know the word, but the concept is that you eat until you're like 80% full.
Yes, yes, I learned
Yeah,
that from Japan. I
yeah.
learned that concept. I love that
We don't
concept.
do
I
that
don't
here, man. We don't do
no,
that. You go
no.
100, and if you're with friends, you go 105. If you're with like family, then you go like 115.
I stopped doing that on Thanksgiving. I still will have turkey once a year because, like I said, I'm not a super strict vegan, and in my mind, I'm like, well, the bird's already dead. You know, like I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not contributing to buying them in the store, but and everyone else around me is eating it. But I stopped having the 120% meals because I love Thanksgiving. That's my favorite. Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve, my two favorite holidays around eating,
yeah,
around food, and around family gathering. I love those holidays, just having everyone around. And I started making my plates smaller because I knew I was going to get seconds and thirds. So I started like really just picking at everything instead of making mounds. I used to make mounds,
hmm,
and then I would go to 120, 130% of full, where your belly's just bursting and you'd have to lay down and you'd be in that food coma.
yeah, yeah. I feel like it
Y-
gets worse and worse, right? Like as we
yes,
age,
yes.
your body's just less resilient.
I
Yeah,
stopped doing
man.
that.
Yeah, speaking about the smaller meals throughout the day, right? That's a pretty now traditional, it came from bodybuilding. It's a pretty traditional fitness model, right? To eat these smaller meals. Just I think that there's some farce to like keep your metabolism revved up. But for
Yeah,
some people there might be something to that because for the newer fad, which is like intermittent fasting or like even like one meal a day, like I
I do
messed around
that.
with that. Yeah, I messed
Yeah,
around with that, but I recognized.
I can't do one meal a day. I just I enjoy eating too much.
Mhm.
So I will do intermittent fasting, but minimum's 2 meals, sometimes typically three, and sometimes even a fourth, but I can't do the one meal a day. I don't know how anyone does that. But I love
Yeah.
intermittent fasting.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's so like again, so personal, so lifestyle dependent.
Yes.
There was a stint where I was working canine on days, and I started messing around with intermittent fasting, and this is probably when I got my leanest. And but I will add something else before anyone gets really excited. Where I would go to work and I wouldn't eat. Sorry. I'd usually do some like light workout, but then working canine back in the day or that day, there would be generally some work, right? So I'd be driving around, I'd be going to calls, I'd run with the dog. Sometimes, you're running like a mile or so,
Yeah.
and then you're still not eating, right? So if I got busy, my target time was trying to eat around like 10 or 11 in the morning, but sometimes I wouldn't eat till 1 or 2, so it naturally kind of led towards a 16 to 18-hour fasting window. But
Yes.
again, like I said, I liked lifting heavy weights. It's not necessarily conducive to that, or it wasn't for me. And yeah, so there's that, but I also recognize about myself and some people that might be inclined towards intermittent fasting for a weight loss hack is that if you're really into a weight loss hack, you probably have some non-ideal eating habits or relationship with food. And so I don't think that I don't know where it comes from because I wouldn't say I grew up with a poor relationship with food, but I definitely have this, like, you could say these binging tendencies. And some of my closest buddies will really laugh at me because it's like an on off switch, right? And there's two types of people. There's those that can moderate, like my wife,
Yeah.
3 bites of ice cream, put the thing back. Like that is a foreign language to me. Like if I crack that thing, or even something like peanut butter, if I take the peanut butter to the couch, like that's 800 calories later, right? Because each full spoon is like 100 calories. So all to say, I know that about myself. And so when I did intermittent fasting, sometimes it worked great. And then sometimes if I was super stressed and then I got with something like a bag of macadamia nuts, like it's gone. Like
And it ends
that's
up
danger.
being 900 calories
Yeah.
because
And
the
then
bag.
like, and you kind of undo all your progress, like for the
Yeah.
purpose. I do believe, and I ponder and I believe that it's probably helpful to give your digestion a break. Like, take some breaks so you're not eating first thing you wake up and last thing right before bed and all these excessive calories. But I also think that if you're eating real food, to your point, actual food, that makes a huge difference away from, the food-like substances that some people call them.
There's a guy that has a program called Below the Red Line. And I don't know if I sent you the photo of it or not, but if you eat, basically it's all plant based. But if you eat, let's say, blueberries and lettuce and spinach, which is like the typical vegan meme, right? But
Yeah,
if you eat,
minus the
actually,
blueberries, because that sounds like pretty delicious.
I saw him. He held up a bag of Doritos. This is what really made it click for me. And he's like, "This bag is 250 calories," and it was a medium sized bag. And he's like, "You could easily down two of these bags of Doritos, and that would be 500 calories." And then in his other hand, he had a like a honeydew melon,
Hmm.
and he's like, "But eating two of these would probably seem like a task. It would seem like a chore. Like who would eat two honeydew melons?"
Yeah,
He's
you'll be
like,
so bloated. Yeah.
but the honeydew and the bag of Doritos are close in calories. Like a full honeydew melon, after you cut it up, is like 350 calories, and that bag of Doritos is empty calories, but it's 250 calories.
Yeah.
And you could easily eat two bags of those without even thinking about it. And just to go back to your point, what you're saying being moderation, people, I'm very disciplined when it comes to that. I can take 3 bites of ice cream, and a small pint will last me a week because I'll just take a few spoonfuls and put it
Yeah.
away. And
Hats off to you, man.
Hershey's chocolate bars, my coworkers will laugh at me because I'll break off 3 pieces, have them, and then stick the rest of the bar. But I also go on binges too, where like I fall off the wagon and I'm just like walking around the precinct looking
Mm,
for chocolate,
dude, that's the
looking,
worst.
yeah, looking for
Holidays, yeah, at
cookies.
the station.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dangerous, especially in the middle of the night. You're poorly rested, you're high stress, and then there's all these goodies, right, that are, to your point, like Doritos, like factory engineered, like a team of
To
scientists to make
make
them.
you want more.
Yeah, the most addicting qualities combined in food in a way that nature would have never conceived.
Yep.
Isn't it nuts, right? But yeah, man, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, yeah, Dr. Greger, it's tough for me because like the guy, he doesn't look healthy.
He's
He doesn't look healthy.
he doesn't do push-ups. I will say
He looks
that.
just like pallid, and like there are a lot of really great examples of people that are plant-based or largely plant-focused, that
Yes.
are living their best life. And I think that the correlation is probably like they're eating real food, like organic, sourced food. People that are eating meat.
There's a young guy. His name starts with an M, N as in Nancy, and I want to say it's like Nehemiah or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, bodybuilder dude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's definitely on some special stuff though.
yeah, it's
Because
vegan
like
though.
you,
Yeah, they're
he
vegan
is
steroids.
vegan. He said that he's been that way, like his parents raised him that way. I think he's one of those people that have never had meat. I can't say I've never had meat, and like I said, I do have turkey every Thanksgiving. But he's completely plant based, and he doesn't have a problem getting his protein, obviously. But I also think that this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people's personal opinion that follow. Yeah,
Yeah, I heard a comedian say, if someone looks like they're on the sauce, he's like, they're probably on the sauce.
yeah, yeah. I mean, unless you look at his parents and they're both like just jacked to the gills, you're like, oh, maybe he did come out, just genetically. But yeah, there is something about that. And It's just tough, man. Like I've heard more and more and read that there are cases if you are strict vegan, so it's probably good that you have a little, you dip your toe, just because there's no natural B vitamins, is it? I think in
B12,
plant B12, yeah.
B12,
So there's
yeah,
generally a deficiency, so you need to supplement, right? So again,
yeah,
it's like do it informed, work with a doc to come back full circle, I think, and I'm not the best at this, especially talking about how much I love food, but if you really care about animals, you really care about the earth, we're talking about throwing plastic in the ocean, all that, like,
yeah.
it's not about vegan. Like, you could be vegan and, like, just wreck the environment, but it's probably eating less, like, right? Like, don't consume so much, don't be a glutton, and then eat local, right? Because think about transporting all this food and like, cool, I got these macadamia nuts from, Hawaii or overseas, but like how many fossil fuels that takes. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole and like how many animals that kills to, harvest these fields, I think like cool, like let's not like point fingers and be super judgy, but if you want to make it about a thing like being good for the environment, then let's be good for the environment.
You know what's so funny is I consider myself very masculine, but
Me too. I
and
consider you very masculine.
thank you,
Yeah, man.
and I am not what would be called a soy boy, but I do drive an electric Ford Mach E, and I have people that have said, "Oh, that's a fad," which they also said about hip hop in back in the '80s that hip hop
Ooh.
was a fad.
Mm.
I remember hearing that in elementary school. Electric cars are here to stay, and they're not going away. It's 10%. I think it's more like six to 10% of the vehicles sold now. And I saw an article that they're working on a Toyota, or not a Toyota. It was a car in Japan that could go like 700 miles, and then they had another battery that they're working on that they think can go 6,000 miles, and that's going to be a game changer. Once you have a battery that can last you like thousands of miles, people are gonna say, I don't want to get gas in." I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I'm getting tongue tied. I had to fill my tank and get an oil change within like a couple of weeks. And I
Mhm.
was like, that's it. I'm going. My girl already had an electric car. I'm like, I'm going electric because I was tired of dropping 85, $90 in my, and I had a big tank. And I don't know how people do it with those Dodge Rams.
Oh, like a
So many, so,
dually or yeah, like
yeah, so many guys have those big trucks, right? With their blue line flag in the back.
well, you gotta I was thinking like red truck, your red pickup with
No,
your fire plates, but, like first responder or not, I think it is pretty goofy if you have a pickup that you've never used as a pickup. Like the bed is pristine and you wouldn't put a bag of dirt in there.
yeah.
Like, why do you have this thing, man? Like, I mean, to each his or her own, but
I actually do want the Ford truck. I want the light, but I'll never go back to gas, and just because I don't want to pay anymore.
mm,
That's my whole thing. Is like I just don't want to pay anymore. I got the line plugged up to the house upstairs, and I know that once they come out with the Jeep, the 2025, I'll definitely. They're just so goddamn expensive right now. Like it's starting at 60,000.
everything's expensive now.
Everything
That's what's
is, but
hard, yeah.
it's like unbelievable. Like the prices of these cars have to come down. Of any type of car, they got to come down. I don't know how people across the country, if they're like on one income in uh, in civil service, right? They're
Mhm.
firemen or they're a police officer. I don't know how they survive.
Well,
I'm in a
they work overtime, they don't hang out with their family, and they burn out, and yeah, yeah, and they buy more things, so they have to keep working more overtime.
yeah, I don't want to be on that. I don't want to be on a hamster wheel. And that's why I started my podcast and that's why I started my coaching company to help first responders get off of that hamster wheel. And I love hearing about what people are doing on the side, their side hustles, and like people that have created successful businesses or coaching companies. I love hearing about that stuff. There's a guy on Instagram that teaches people how to do ATMs. Not my thing, but I love following him, and I think it's really cool. There's another guy who was Georgia Bureau of Police, and he teaches people how to do real estate. and I love him for it. I had him on my show. I love hearing what people are doing to supplement their income. It's just like a fascination of mine, and
Hmm.
I think it's different. A lot of people are talking about mental health and wellness and suicide prevention, but I think barely anyone focuses on the guy that has 15 years, 20 years, or 25 years, and they're thinking about, all right, it's almost time to wrap this show up. It's almost time to start collecting my pension, but you're still in your 40s, or low 50s. You're going to be able to work for another 20 years. You're not just going to sit home, because that's a quick recipe for death, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
got to figure out what else have the skills of the police department given you that you can do. And that's, for me, it led me to speaking, because I was in the community policing unit, and I used to go to these community meetings, and I'd be at the front of the room talking and addressing the community members. And I always felt comfortable in front of people. And I've always felt comfortable interviewing uh, victims or suspects or bad guys. So, like,
yeah. Just talk. You can talk, right?
yeah, I could definitely talk. But I think um, that comes down to building rapport. Like, can you build rapport with people? And I think that is one of my skills. So, I always said I was good in the box, and I like that expression. I like to say it, and it's also true. Like, I'm a good interviewer. So I worked in special victims for 2.5 years, close to 3 years, and I interviewed children from, like, that could barely speak, all the way up to 18 years old, and also then I'd go in the next room and interview the bad guy, and talk to them. And one of my most proudest moments as an investigator was when I got this guy to admit what he had done. Well, it was a couple that I got to admit. But I got this guy to break down in tears and he asked me if he was an evil person, and I had to tell him with a straight face, "No, you're not. You're,
Mm,
you're not an evil person."
yeah.
And but when I came out of the room, I was like, "Yes, I got him to cry."
Yeah, it's such a dynamic, right? Like I didn't work in investigations, but on patrol, speaking from personal experience and watching my guys do it, like on the scene or like on body cam, it's like they want to say what everyone wants to say, and sometimes they do,
Yes.
right? And sometimes I'm not super unprofessional, right? But it's like that real talk, like see what this got you, like just you just want to tell them like, hey, stop being such an a-hole, right? Or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But
Right.
then like detectives are like they have to be such the opposite, because like, yeah, it doesn't do anything to disparage somebody. It might make the community member feel kind of good that like, yeah, someone actually got some accountability. But like when you have to appear to empathize with a terrible, terrible, heinous person to build rapport, right? To get them to
Yeah.
lower their guard, and you act like you can even see it their way, right? And that's
Yes.
a very
Well, that's the
challenging
thing
and
with
impressive thing.
homicide investigations. Like, that's who I learned interview and interrogation from, was a homicide detective from Rochester, New York, I want to say, from upstate. And he made it clear that, let's say you're investigating a homicide, and sex abuse of a child is very, very similar. They don't want to tell you what they did. So you can't go in there and start, like, throwing pictures like what they do on television. You can't start throwing videos at them and throwing pictures down the table and say, "I got you, man. Now tell me everything that you did." You can't do that. You got to work your way slowly into it. You got to build a rapport. They have to actually like you, because if they don't like you, they're gonna be like, "F you, man.
Yeah.
Get my lawyer." And
Yeah.
that's not the direction that you want to go in.
Hmm.
You want to build a rapport and have them talk to you about their rough childhood, and have them talk to you about, the fact that they have a drug problem now, and they've been trying to get help, and that they have some dark secrets, and, like, you got to get those dark secrets out, and then you got to get them to tell you. I actually like being on video better than having to sit there and write, because when I'm sitting there and writing in front of you, you might be like, "Well, what's he writing on that
Yeah.
paper?"
Yeah.
So that's why I actually prefer to just have the camera on behind me or above my head or wherever the camera is, and just have a one-to-one conversation with you, because then we can just talk. I don't have to have the pen. It's almost like something is in between us. It's like when you're standing on stage, you don't want to have a podium in front of you, because now you have a barrier between you
Yeah.
and the audience.
Yeah, it becomes symbolic and it's
And
a
that's what
literal.
paper and pen does. So, like,
Hmm.
a little tip for any of your new guys that are out there, they're going to be taking a statement from a bad guy. uh, get the details, get the notes, write as few as words as you can that will help you to remember the conversation, if it's not something that's recorded,
Yeah.
and then step out of the room and then go write it up, and then go back and read it to them and say, hey, this is what we talked about. And I always make sure that I tell them, like, look, I play no games. I write exactly what you told me. And I'll say, hey, remember you told me that I had a burglar tell me that he was thirsty, so he went into the fridge and grabbed a Gatorade and drank it. I had no clue that he had drank a Gatorade, and I'm like, "Look, I put that in there. See, you drank a Gatorade." And I'm like, "I don't play any games. I just write exactly what you write." But a little tip is to step out of the room. Don't sit there, because it might take you 25, 30 minutes to sit there and write this statement out if you're not typing it. Sometimes, even typing, you might be a slow typer. I'm a slow writer, so I have to step out of the room and go out, get my thoughts together, write it, and then go back in and then let them read it.
Yeah, a couple things pop into mind. One is that even if you're a decent writer, right, you're kind of sketching, it does distract, right? It distracts from the here and now. Like we're looking at each other, we're having an organic conversation.
Yeah,
But if I'm looking down, then you're like, whoa, wait, I'm here.
yeah, right.
But then on top of that, even if you're a proficient writer, you're literally breaking your focus. You have to slow down to write. You can't literally
Yes,
do two things at one time. But another layer that's really interesting now is that more and more agencies are gonna have body cams if they don't already, right? So hey, just be here, right? Like it's
yes.
recording. You can go review it later. But now, like I don't know if you're familiar, but Axon, we have this package coming up before too long at our department where the AI is extremely credible, apparently, in tests and how it's been demoed. Is that I could be talking if we're in the same room, and I walk in, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Dave?" And it kind of can narrate a little bit of like you know, Eric walked in the room, saw Dave, say, "Hey, what's up, Dave?" Because it perceives I already know you, right? So they're like, "Oh, there's a guy in the room named Dave," and then I could be describing like, "Hey, so like I see you're wearing that white crew neck. I know that's what you were wearing last Friday, man." And so it'll perceive these things that I'm kind of dropping, and then narrate the audio, transcribe it. So there's another layer there.
Have you? I love the company Axon. I absolutely love them. I'm gonna find a way to have them sponsor my show, or like work for them somehow. But I love them. Have you been on evidence.com? Have you been
Yeah,
on that
yeah,
website?
we use it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so when you watch the body cam footage, it's actually transcribed, like the words
Yeah. Hmm.
on the video as you're watching it. You can
Yeah.
toggle that on and off, but I love that feature. It's an amazing time that we live in, and that's only going to get better. That's like version what 2 or version 1.5, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Imagine version 5, 5.0, version 6.0. Like,
Yeah.
it's we live in an amazing time.
Yeah, and the tech keeps building on itself. So I had a body cam on a call where I went to this awful domestic, and later the suspect is suspected of killing that poor woman. But
Oh
I
man.
go in, I'm looking at the body cam, and what happens is they didn't have the transcription back when it was recorded, but when I'm reviewing it to prep for testimony, they have the audio, and it even has audio. Some of it was accurate, and some of it kind of depicted that it wasn't intelligible. But what people are saying in the back of the room, that when I'm interviewing the person, I can't hear what they're saying, and I can't perceive that. Even if I listen to the audio, it's kind of tough. But when you listen to the audio again, and it has the little notes there, you're like, oh, that probably is what they're saying, right? And so,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about for evidence, but just for context, like what a for sure game changer.
I'm a big tech geek. I consider myself a futurist, and I look out for anything that like has to do with the future. And right now, we have the ability to have a phone call, and Google is coming out with a phone that will translate in real time. So like I could call someone in China, have a full conversation, and it will translate in my ear what they're saying to me.
That's
Right
nuts.
now,
Wow.
that is nuts. Right now, they have phones that can do that. We're at the forefront of like an amazing time where like you're not going to need to learn another language because we'll have universal translators.
Well, translators on the job are awful. They're so bad. It's so clunky. Like you're saying what you're saying, and then sometimes there's like this sidebar conversation, and you're like, for sure they're having a full on conversation without me.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm,
Yes.
you know, good intent assumed it would be clarification on like dialect or context, but sometimes like it sounds like one's asking a question, the other one's talking back, and I'm like, hey, I'm still here. Like y'all want
Right.
to like, can we play by the book where you literally say only what I say and you literally say only what they say?
Yeah, I've had that
Yeah,
a bunch of times.
yeah.
I've had that a bunch of times where I'm like, all right, un momento, which is like the very little Spanish that I know. Un momento. And and I
Hmm.
turn to the cop. All right, tell me exactly what he said just now. And
Yeah,
he's like, yeah, I was just clarifying what he said because he's like, I wasn't sure, you know, maybe my translator was Puerto Rican and the suspect was El Salvadorian. And
yeah,
he's like, there's a word that he used that I wasn't sure
yeah.
about. And, I'm just clarifying the
Exactly.
word, like you said.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll have to like pause them in between and go, un momento. And then I'll turn to the cop and I'll be like, all right, tell me exactly what did he just say just now? Because that's
Hmm.
important.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So, clearly you have a love for conversation, communication. It's a knack,
I
it's a
do.
skill, it's a talent. You're a speaker, you travel for this. So, and you have this podcast that's been going for how long?
For 3 years now, since 2021, I think was when I launched it. I took a little 4 or 5 month break hiatus because I felt like the format was getting a little stagnant. But then I remembered you got to get to over 100 episodes to really find your groove and find your flow.
Mm,
Did I tell you about podcast movement and podcast evolutions?
no, let's talk about it.
All right, so there's a conference that I tell every podcast to go to. The one that's going to be closest for you is the one that's going to be in LA. It's called Podcast Evolutions, and that's like their smaller one, and then their bigger conference is Podcast Movement. And if you just Google Podcast Movement, it'll pop up, and I'll send you a link for it too. I told another guy who's on the West Coast, you have to go to this event because there's so many things that you don't know that you just don't know. And then they're going to be pairing up some advertisers. They're going to have some advertisers there that want to pair up with your show, Blue Grit Wellness. So you might find a sponsor there, or you just might find an idea. Like you never know, like what class you're going to be listening to, or what other podcaster. And you're like, wow, that's a really great idea. Like I didn't think about it. Like this last time when I went to Denver, Colorado, the last podcast movement, they talked about pitching your show to networks. I just had that idea. I was like, oh, maybe somebody will pay me to produce my show. And that in itself could be a lot of work to pitch your show to different networks. But then I started thinking, well, I started thinking bigger. It actually expanded my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm recommending that you go, because I started thinking, well, how could I turn my show into an actual TV show? I was thinking, well, I could turn it into a YouTube show first, and then I could maybe pitch the YouTube. If the following got big enough, then I could take that to a network and say, hey, and if you start to get millions of followers, they'll notice and they'll just approach you. That
Yeah.
they'll reach out to your email and say, hey, would you consider, all kinds of doors open up to you. So that's the long way of me saying definitely go to Podcast Evolutions. It's in LA. It's in March. You got a couple months to plan for it.
Mm.
And the other one is in DC, and I'm just gonna drive there because it's 4 hours from New York. So
Yeah.
excuse my accent if anyone could hear
Yeah,
my
yeah, which is
accent.
always crazy. It's a crazy reminder of the East Coast where you can just go across like 6 states in a couple hours, whereas like you got to drive for a couple hours to get out of Washington, and then you got a
Yeah,
couple hours to get to California, and then you could drive all day and still be in California. So,
yeah,
very
California.
different.
You could do a 9-10 hour drive through California.
Oh, for
It
sure,
is
for sure.
it is very different, but yeah, there's also probably really inexpensive flights from Washington to
Yeah.
LA.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about how you can expand and hopefully people are applying that notion to whatever the thing is, right? Whether it's work or whether it's the side hustle or whether it's your hobby or just how you want to develop personally, like you're not aware of what you're not aware of, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so you have to
Yes.
look at other examples of modeling and be like, Bruce Lee, right? Take what's useful, discard what's not. But you can't do that unless you expose yourself, unless you introduce that. And for me, I tend to be in my head, and I tend to be a perfectionist and an overthinker. That's one thing that I literally remember verbalizing as a young officer. And like, how do I make a good decision now and the best decision now? And old SWAT cop was like that I looked up to was like, hey man, like you gotta be okay that good is way better than great later. Like good now is better than great later, and that's patrol. Like you don't have time. You have a second or a couple seconds or half a second. And so that's something that I really leaned into for my career, and then a personal thing that I've pushed myself. So even the podcast, I'd molded over, but it was really just being on other people's. And I was like, man, I'm getting some compliments, and there's definitely things I want to talk about and I want to explore this angle. It's not that it's not being done by someone else, but I think that there's value in doing it here locally. So I just
Yes.
did it, right? And I recognized that my first episodes I'd hate them, right? Like
Yes.
it was checking the ego, like, hey, just put out this product. It might be a garbage product, but I love how a lot of really successful people in whatever walk have shared a version of that, right? Like their first invention, their first company. Are like, oh yeah, first 5 companies were garbage. Like I wouldn't pay a dime for them now, right? But you had to go through the reps to build that, and so that's why it's been so cool to connect with guys like you. But before I lose track in bringing up the podcast and bringing up your passion to share story, I'm curious because you talked about feedback for the young folks. We see that as a thing for the youngest, where communicating in person, one on one, is difficult, right?
Yes.
It's online, it's on text. So, where did you get your gift of the gab, and do you have insight for those that would seek to develop that?
So if you have, it actually began with just looking up to incredible speakers like Tony Robbins and Les Brown and Bob Proctor. These speakers that I would listen to their audios, and like I would start to feel fired up, and I want to be that person for someone else. Like
Hmm.
I want someone to be like, yo, he was a pretty chill guy, and I want them to start to feel like fired up from the opportunities that are all around us. Like this age of AI right now, it's opened up so many doors. There's so many opportunities, but to bring it around to speaking, there's someone that you listen to now that if you listen to those types of if you listen to speakers, right? But there's someone that fires you up, and at one point they were not good. They were scared. They were, they were just not, they were not great. And if you have even a little bit of an inkling to do it, there's a lot of ways to get low stakes practice. Being on a podcast is a way to get low stakes practice. Starting your own podcast, it's really important to have your own platform, right? Even if you only do a 5 episodes, right? Or 10 series episodes, at least you have something that's published, right? You've become a creator now. If you listen to podcasts, if you listen to motivational speakers, then and you kind of have that feeling inside of you like, hey, I think that's something I might want to do, then the desire to do it is the power to do it. And you just have to like take a few small steps towards it. And all of a sudden, more and more things open up towards you. That's the answer to the young guys out there.
Yeah,
Like if you have a little bit of desire, then that means you have the power to do it. You just have to like seek and you shall find, right? So you just have to
yeah,
start looking for people. Like I'll help someone for $1. You reach out to me, I'll help you for one for $1. Honestly, I'll help for no money, but
Yeah.
I say a
No,
dollar. I say a dollar because when people pay, they pay attention, right?
it's a thing, man. Like, I don't know how much, you're probably the same, but you take care of yourself, you're very researched, you know health and exercise, and it's a passion of yours, as it is for
Yes.
me. And through the years, even when I knew way less, but I was finding success, like, a lot of people came to me and to ask for feedback, and you give out for free, right? Like, for sure, you
Yes.
want to help people, but I have seen anecdotally that the people that, I mean, almost everyone that's received advice, they didn't really take it, right? They didn't really apply it. And I have a really good friend that literally years later hired a trainer, and he started getting really excited, and he started saying almost verbatim all the things I was saying. He's like, see, like, I just got to focus on like a main muscle group, a day, or do total body every few days. And like, I just got to find what works for me. And like, he's talking about eating more real food, and like, be mindful of your timing. Don't eat right before bed, or don't eat all this garbage mindlessly. Like, I was like,
Oh my God.
that's awesome, man. That's
So that's
awesome.
also why you have to charge people, because people really don't pay attention until they pay. People consider free advice not as valuable as paid advice. And the same exact advice that you're giving for free, someone is willing to pay for. There's someone charging for the same advice that you're giving for free. So you might as well learn
Or worse,
how to,
or worse.
or worse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or worse advice. Two things I wanted to say that you brought up lifting heavy. When I was in my 20s, I would lift heavy all the time, and I was like a 3 parts body, like typical bro
Yeah,
splits type
split. Yeah.
workout. So, and I would work out 3, maybe 4 days a week. So that was in my 20s and sometimes in my 30s. But I was also doing jujitsu then, and I'd be hurt a lot. So I couldn't. There would be times when I couldn't work out. But now I'm in my upper 40s. I'm 48. And I actually really, really enjoy going to the gym every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do total body every single day. And people say, oh my God, that's crazy. But there's actually a lot of people that do it. And like you said, you just have to find where you are and what stage of your life. I lift so that my muscles stay tight and so that I can be at a level where, like, on any given day, right now I can run a 5K,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't run a lot, but I lift so fast that I'm always heavy breathing. And like, if you got me out there, I could go run a 5K and have a conversation with you throughout the whole thing. And it's not to say that I'm a good runner. It's just I've kept myself in really good peak conditioning because I train every day and I train my whole body. Like yesterday in the gym, I did pull-ups, leg press, and push-ups. So as soon as I came down from the pull-up, I did like 7 sets of that, very little rest. And people say, "Oh my God, that's crazy that you do whole body." But I just switch up the exercise. Like today I did whole body, but instead of doing a back focus, I did more of a shoulder focus, and I did more of a chest press and different leg exercises. So like, I don't do leg press every day. I'll do a single leg split lunge. I'll do a single leg lunge, and then the next day I'll do more leg press. And some days I'll go a little heavier, but I do total body every single day. The only reason I'll miss the gym is if work gets in the way and I'm just too tired, like you were saying. Like, sometimes I'll get stuck for a 10-hour overtime
Mm.
tour where, like, I work basically a double, and I'll just be shot the next day, and I'll say, I got to take care of myself. But some days, even on days like that, I'll wake up and I'll want to walk on the treadmill. So I'm doing something every single day, even on days that I'm tired. And the main thing is you have to listen to your body and you have to know yourself. Like you said, if you know that you can't make it every single day, or you're going to feel sore, if you're going to go heavy just because you love to go heavy, then that's fine. Just know yourself.
Know what it's helping, know what it's hurting, and know what your mission is. And that's where I
Yes.
think, to your point, I'm very much more in the direction where you are, where even in
You
my
don't want to get hurt. You don't
Yeah, I
want to
don't
get
want to get
hurt now.
hurt. I've
Right.
gotten hurt. I've hurt myself in the gym. I've hurt myself at work. I've hurt myself in my very short stint doing jujitsu, and I'm taking a break right now. I'm reevaluating, to be honest. I know
Yeah.
that there's some followers that are like, oh yeah, you're rolling, and I have myself to blame, right? Because I was rolling early morning with some, early 20-something-year-olds, and I'm like, I'm the old man, but I have a little bit of pride in that I can hold my own with my
Yep.
gas tank and my relative strength, right? So I certainly could have gone with a different tempo and a different speed, knowing that my focus was just to get more mat exposure and challenge myself in a different way. But again, that on-off switch is a hard thing for me. Finding that dimmer is hard. So full transparency, I might actually try yoga. I had a couple yoga practitioners I interviewed recently that will have been will have aired by the time this airs. If I'm going to check my ego, that's something I'm terrible at, right? Like the mobility, some of the focus. I've literally tried a few poses through the years with my wife watching, and she's like, "You're not." And she tries to correct me, right? She's like, "Here, pull your shoulders back," and then I'm like gonna fall over every second because I'm stiff.
Yeah.
So from lifting, probably. So all to say, when we think about mission and first responder work, I was that guy, right, on the bro split where some days you worked your back so much that you're like hunching over with all your gear. You're like, okay, that's not the goal. And then
No.
some days, like you're limping almost because you crushed your legs so hard. But like, can you chase somebody right now? Like maybe with a strong dose of hope and a lot of adrenaline, you might be able to get it. But yeah, like right now, I work out just about every day. But I do like the note where you say, "Hey, listen to your body. Don't be stubborn," because I heard it. I don't know who originally said it because it's been re-quoted so many times, but to skip an hour of critical sleep for a workout, especially if you're held over work, right? Your sleep schedule's not where it should be, and you're delayed on sleep through the week.
Yep.
Skipping that sleep hour for working out is like stepping over a dollar to get a dime.
Yes.
That notion, that's something that I really didn't acknowledge or pay attention to until literally the last couple of years, where I went underslept and I went over caffeinated just to get my workout in. But in hindsight, like, man, that's dumb. It's just ego, right? Even if I had good numbers that day or, a lot of output, like you're under recovered. So like that's the point, is to tear down so you can rebuild, not just tear down to tear down to tear down.
Yes.
But that's where I was at. So yeah, the younger men and women listening, please heed our advice. We've been there. It's fun. Like, it's fun to throw around big weight, but my chiropractor would say that there's strong evidence of that, and the gear, and sitting in a car, all these things.
Yeah, I always been afraid of squat racks and compressing my spine. I'm a short guy to begin with, so I don't want to be any shorter, and I don't want to compress my spine. So I've always stayed away from squatting, and people swear by squatting, but I found the same effects doing single leg exercises and dumbbell squats, and also doing heavy leg press when I have the desire to do it. So I like the one where you're laying back on a 45. Is that called a hack squat, or is that the
When
one
you're
where
laying on
you're
your back, that's a leg press. But yeah, the one that's
okay?
kind of like, oh yeah, where you're more upright, like you're standing but leaning back. Yeah, that's a hack
Yeah.
squat. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do I won't do them on the same day. I'll typically do leg press one day, and then I'll do a hack squat another day with a single leg exercise of some sort. And that that just works for me. I feel like I'm able to do it every day. I know I'd get much better results if I had a trainer, if I had a coach, but I've been working out since I was 15, and a little bit of ego, a little bit of pride. I'm like, I don't need a trainer.
Yeah.
I'm not competing for shows or anything. I'm just training myself, and I've been in a gym and working out my entire life. So I've had trainers in the past, and I did get amazing results. Like when I was overweight by 20 pounds, I hired a nutritionist,
Yeah.
and
Which, let me inject, because you share
yeah,
that you're not a super tall guy. You shared with me on your show, like 20 pounds for a smaller framed person, that's a
it's
lot,
a
right?
lot.
So it's a
It's a lot.
significant percent. So if you're like a 220-pound guy hearing that, like he's not your size, right? So it's relative.
Yeah, no, I'm 5'4", 100, and right now I'm 150 pounds, which is like lightweight if you're fighting in UFC, right? Or if you cut down, it would be
Yeah.
featherweight. So
Yeah.
I always say featherweight is my ideal weight for my size. And when I started hitting 165, 167, at one point close to 170, I looked kind of stocky, but I knew that that wasn't ideal for me. I'd rather have a men's physique frame than have a stocky. And some people want that power frame. There's a guy I follow, something tat, inked warrior.
Hmm.
You follow that guy?
I don't think so.
He's got a similar
I am
build.
imagining a pretty jacked guy though. Like a handle like
He's
Inked
pushing
Warrior.
200. He's pushing 200, and his legs are massive. I started to say I've never um I've never been into powerlifting because I'm just afraid of getting hurt. So
Mm-hmm.
like I love calisthenics. I'd rather be shredded, and like I'd rather have more of the Spider-Man frame,
Yeah,
the Flash frame than the Hulk frame. And some guys want that hulking frame,
for
some
sure.
guys want that. For me, it just wasn't the right fit for myself mentally.
Yeah. And I think that's a young man thing. Like, I mean, what young man doesn't look at muscle magazines and action movies and just be like, I want to be that, right? And
Yeah.
it's not for everyone, right? You gotta factor in genetics and like what your goals are, what your mission is, right? Like, there's a lot of 5'5", 5'4" dudes that like they're gonna put on as much weight as they can and lift as much weight as they can, and more power
Yeah.
to them, right? If they don't have to be
Yeah.
functional and if they get hurt, then it's not a big deal. But if it's your livelihood, like, I think it's worth paying attention to. Man, we covered a lot of ground. What I want to end on, tying it back to what we're talking about in, most of your pursuit in the Hero Academy, is you're helping people explore like that extra thing. And a lot of times it's side hustles, a lot of times it's these other passions. But I think that's a critical conversation in wellness because it's really come up a lot in my recent episodes where whether you're a psychologist or you're a retired cop, like we talk about this overinvestment in identity. And,
Mm.
you and I are talking to a ton of first responders. And so someone might argue like, okay, cool, your hobby or your off time is literally talking more about the job. But I think it's necessary, and it's a different energy, it's a different angle. And I just want to go there, right? And I wonder what thoughts you have from talking to these swaths of people over so many years. Like, what are your reflections on people's overinvestment in the police or in the first responder identity? And what are your thoughts on what people can do about that?
Well, it can be very scary to think that your identity is. I once heard a quote that your identity is coming to an end. I heard a quote that said, "Trauma is the loss of identity." Like if someone is traumatized, and I think of the children that I used to serve and the children that I used to help, and that's what they had was a loss of their innocence, right? And what to bring it back to police officers, when they retire and they've had a long career, if you don't have something to turn to that you're passionate about, you will dwell on the memories of what you had instead of what you still have and what you can become. And I've always dreamt of the opportunities of what I could become. So I'm a forward thinker, and like I said before, I'm a futurist. So I'm constantly daydreaming about the future, and I'm extremely grateful for my career in law enforcement as a detective and as a police officer. I was an active street cop. I'm extremely grateful for those experiences and everything that they've given me. But I know that I'm coming to the end of that career, and I know that I have an identity outside of my current title as a detective. I know that I have an identity of one that I've created myself. So you can reinvent yourself starting today and say, "Hey, I'm a speaker now. I'm a podcaster. I'm an author." You could start writing your book, write one page, write the title, and you could say, "I'm an author." You can like I give you permission to say that you're an author just by writing the title and writing the chapters of your book. And now you're taking on a new identity. So now I'm an author, and I have written two books. I'm working on the third. It's like in my phone right now, and it's on resiliency because it's a hot topic right now. So I've taken on the identity of a podcaster. I've taken on the identity of an author and as a speaker, and I just assign those things to myself. So you can give yourself permission to say I'm an inventor. I talked to a fire, I think she's a lieutenant who creates dolls for young girls because she said people come up to her all the time and ask her if she's a real you know, firefighter. And so she created dolls. So now she has the title of inventor. So, and she has more inventions that she's thinking of. I
Hmm.
love hearing stories like that of people reinventing themselves. And you just have to give yourself permission to reinvent yourself and give yourself permission to title yourself whatever it is that you think you want to do next. Just take on the title. Like for a long time when I was in my 20s, I had business cards that said I was a real estate investor, and I actually had 3 properties. I sold them, which I wish I didn't, but I sold those other properties, and I had business cards that said I was a real estate investor, which, like, I guess if you have a couple of properties, you can call yourself that. But my point is, you can title and call yourself whatever you want to. And if you're actually walking the walk, and over time, you actually become that thing. Like I said, the perfect example is with the book and with the author. You write your title, you write a few chapter titles. Now you're an author. So just decide what you want to become and know that there's a life after the job. And the job that you have doesn't define who you are as a person. One of my favorite quotes is, if God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. And I truly believe that I am one of his superstars. And like, my picture is up on his refrigerator. And I have a calling to serve people that have forgotten that they're more than just the title that they were given.
I love that, and it's such a critical thing, with so many people continuing to retire, and I know people that are having a hard time with that. Right? They have a hard time that it's approaching, or they have a hard time that they've left, whether it's an early retirement, as we've seen across the nation. So yeah, it's an invitation to bet on yourself.
Here's my premise of my next book that's coming out by the time this probably releases. It's called The Heroic Coaching Blueprint. And the main premise is, if you have 20 years in your career, you have experiences that the open market will pay for. And you just have to define those for yourself. Like, I know that I'm a good interviewer. I know that I can coach people because I can pull out what you're good at, and we can use AI to transcribe that, and we can create a book, we can create a coaching course, whatever it is that you want to create for yourself. So if you have 20 years doing your job, you have some experience dealing with people in the military, in law enforcement and civil service, firefighters, nurses. They have servant hearts. They took that position because they want to serve people, they want to help people. They didn't take the position because they thought they were going to become multimillionaires. They took it out of a sense of duty and honor and service. Like, you want to serve people, you're a servant, you're a civil servant.
Hmm.
You can continue to serve people just in a different form, a different fashion. You just have to decide, yeah, I still like people. Some people say I hate people and I don't ever want to talk to. Some people say they're going to move to the mountains
Hmm.
and they're never going to deal with people ever again. And I understand that sentiment too. I
Sure.
completely, but you've been dealing with the underbelly of the world for your entire career.
Yeah.
And you just have to remember that there's a lot of good people out there. And the beauty of starting your own, whatever it is that you start, your own enterprise, the beauty of it is you can choose what type of people you want to work with. Like, I've chosen first responders because I know they have servant hearts. That's why I've chosen that. I know that 99.9% of them are good people. I just know that, like,
Hmm.
just from years of dealing with these people don't have STDs and they're not selling drugs.
Well,
They're taking you. Well.
we're gonna leave it right
Well,
there. We're gonna leave it right there.
yeah, that's a good place to end off.
No, man, no, it's so good because we should expand past that. There's a character that there's a heart there that
Yes,
came into this
yes,
job, and it was only further developed in that, right? So the person
yes.
that wants to quit on society, no, maybe you need a vacation. You don't need to be a
Right,
hermit.
right.
And truly, so I mean, a couple episodes I looked down real quick where it was episode 31 with Jason Salema, right? He was on track to be a sergeant, team leader, all this stuff, right? But he's like, why not, right? And starts looking at these other jobs, and he's coaching executives, right, in a national or international company, right? And then plugged a 49 with Chris Nielsen, and that's a popular episode of a local cop. But he was always chasing like greatness, like he wanted to be great at something. He was a trained attorney that became a cop, and now he's doing attorney work, again, with first responders and this subject matter expertise from different angles. But really, it was like he's got teenage kids, and he's like, I just want to be the best freaking dad I can be. And like, what greater legacy than the people you care about? And so I love the things you're talking about specifically, writing, speaking, building something. Like that's something that really feeds me in this station of life, in this chapter of life. Yeah, so tell everybody where they can find your books and where they can learn more about you and follow along with what you're doing.
LinkedIn, it's going to be David Leath, the number 1. Instagram, it's Coach Super Dave, the number 1, because I couldn't get it without the 1.
Yeah, where's this fake Coach Super Dave? We got to find him.
Yeah.
Or her.
My primary website is my name. It's davidleath.com. And the book will be out on Amazon. This has been fun, and it's energizing too.
Yeah.
So like, I'm gonna drop and do a few push-ups when I'm done.
Oh, heck yeah, man! I'm about it. I'm gonna go in the gym as well.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity and giving me this energy to keep the message going. I appreciate you.
Likewise, man. Right back at you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.